The certified letter arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, dropped off by a city courier who avoided eye contact like he knew he was delivering bad news. I signed for it with a knot in my chest, my hands shaking as I tore open the envelope. When I read the contents, my heart sank. $15,000. That's what the city's Parks and Recreation Department was demanding from me for unauthorized use of public land. The offense, our community garden, the one I'd spent a year building with my neighbors, the one that city official Patricia Hensley had personally greenlit 6 months ago. I glanced out my window and saw Patricia herself driving by in her sleek city-issued SUV, her sunglasses glinting in the sun. She slowed down just enough to flash me a smug little nod before speeding off. The woman was reveling in this. Let me back up a bit. 8 months ago, I decided it was time to do something about the vacant lot at the end of our street. It was an eyesore overgrown with weeds, littered with broken bottles, and a magnet for trouble. My neighbors and I had been talking for years about turning it into a community garden, a place where kids could learn to grow vegetables, where families could gather, and where we could finally have something green in our concrete-heavy neighborhood. So, I did what any responsible citizen would do in a city with a million rules. I submitted a formal proposal to the Parks and Recreation Department. It was a 50-page beach site plans, irrigation schematics, a budget, even letters of support. From 20 neighbors, Patricia Hensley, the department's deputy director, reviewed it herself. She called me into her office, all smiles, and praised my community spirit. Her voice was syrupy, like she was auditioning for a feel-good movie. She signed the approval form with a flourish, handed it back to me, and said, "This is exactly the kind of initiative our city needs." I should have known something was wrong when her smile lingered a little too long. The garden came together beautifully. My neighbor, Maria Gonzalez, a retired landscaper with 40 years of experience, led the design. We had volunteers from every corner of the neighborhood, kids, grandparents, even the grumpy guy from the corner store who never smiles. We cleared the lot, built raised beds, and planted tomatoes, zucchini, and sunflowers. By the end of 3 months, it was a little oasis. Families held picnics there. Kids painted murals on the fence. And our heating bills, well, they didn't go down, but our spirits sure went up. I thought that was the end of it. Then, 2 weeks after the garden's official opening, I got the first notice. Patricia had reassessed the project and decided it violated city land use codes. The notice claimed our garden was encroaching on public property and disrupting the aesthetic cohesion of the municipal landscape. I was being fined $150 a day until we dismantled the garden, or brought it into compliance, whatever that meant. The notice was vague, but the dollar amount was crystal clear. I tried to stay calm. I scheduled a meeting with the Parks Department, bringing my entire proposal, the signed approval form, photos of the lot before and after, and statements from neighbors about how the garden had transformed our street. But when I walked into the city office, I found Patricia sitting at the head of a conference table, flanked by 2 department staffers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She was wearing her signature blazer, the one she always wore to look like she was in charge, and she spoke in that condescending tone that made my blood boil. She explained that my approval had been conditional, that she'd only approved the concept of the garden, not the execution. When I pointed out that the approval form said nothing about conditions, she just smirked and said, "That's standard procedure." The other staffers, Mike Torres and Ellen Chang, nodded along like bobbleheads. I later learned Mike was angling for a promotion that Patricia controlled, and Ellen had been hired on Patricia's recommendation. They weren't about to challenge her. The fines kept coming to $150 a day, no exceptions. By the end of the first month, I owed $7,500. By the end of the second, it was $15,000. The letters got nastier, threatening liens on my house and legal action if I didn't pay up or tear down the garden. My neighbors were furious, but most were too scared to act. Patricia had a reputation for making life hell for anyone who crossed her. That's when I started digging. I talked to other community leaders, keeping it casual at first to avoid raising red flags. But when I mentioned the garden fines, people opened up. Jamal Carter, who ran a youth center downtown, told me Patricia had approved his new basketball court, then fined him $8,000 when she decided the hoops were too reflective. Linda Pham, who'd organized a mural project, said Patricia had signed off on it, then slapped her with a $6,000 fine for unapproved colors. The pattern was obvious. Patricia would approve community projects, let people invest time, and money, then hit them with retroactive fines, especially if they ever questioned her authority. In my case, I made the mistake of speaking up at a city council meeting a year earlier, questioning why the Parks Department's budget for consulting fees had ballooned by $20,000. I started documenting everything, every story, every reversed approval, every questionable fine. I also dug into the city's municipal codes and found some eye-opening details. The Parks Department couldn't revoke approvals without a documented violation. Fines had to be approved by a review board, not a single official, and Patricia's habit of issuing daily penalties without a hearing, that was flat out illegal. My next step was filing a formal complaint with the city's Office of Accountability. I included my evidence, plus statements from other victims of Patricia's schemes. I also reached out to Marcus Reed, a local journalist who'd been covering City Hall scandals. He was all ears when I laid out the pattern. Things moved fast after that. The Office of Accountability launched an investigation into the Parks Department's records. Marcus's news team showed up at a city council meeting, cameras rolling, asking Patricia pointed questions about her approval practices. She tried to play it cool, but her usual polish was cracking. The investigation uncovered a cesspool of corruption. Patricia had issued over $150, zero in fines over 3 years, most without proper oversight. She'd been funneling city funds to a consulting firm owned by her cousin, disguised as maintenance contracts. She'd even altered department records to make it look like her fines had been board approved. Marcus's news segment, titled The Garden Grinch, How One Official Extorted a City, aired during prime time, featuring interviews with me and other community leaders. My calm explanation of Patricia's contradictory approvals became the story's backbone. Patricia tried to fight back, calling the news station and threatening legal action, but Marcus aired her frantic voicemail in a follow-up piece, making her look even worse. The city issued an emergency suspension of Patricia's authority, and all her fines were frozen pending review. My $15,000 fine was nullified within days. But the real bombshell came when the district attorney's office filed charges for extortion, fraud, and abuse of power at an emergency community meeting. The room was packed with neighbors who had been silenced by Patricia's tactics for years. One by one, they shared their stories. An elderly woman, Mrs. Delgado, told how Patricia had fined her for dollars, zero for a non-compliant birdhouse in her yard. A young couple described being fined $7, zero for a fence Patricia had approved, then deemed immodern. Patricia showed up to the meeting in her blazer, but it was wrinkled and her usual confidence was gone. She tried to defend herself, claiming she was protecting city standards, but the crowd wasn't having it. When the council announced her immediate removal, the room erupted in cheers. The criminal trial was the final nail in the coffin. Patricia was found guilty on multiple counts, sentenced to 3 years in prison, and ordered to pay $400,000 in restitution to affected residents. When the judge read the verdict, she broke down, insisting she was just doing her job. The judge wasn't moved. Our garden is still thriving. The city appointed a new deputy director, someone who actually listens to the community. We've added a butterfly garden and a small playground, and the lot is now officially designated as public parkland. Thanks to a new ordinance we pushed for, the neighborhood feels alive again, and I've learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes you have to fight the system to protect what's right. If you're dealing with a petty tyrant like Patricia, don't back down. Document everything, rally your community, and shine a light on the truth. It's not easy, but it's worth it.